Excellent. So thanks ever so much, everyone, for tuning into this topic today. So this is our Talk to Action series. And today's topic is called Walking the Talk, the 6 Behaviours of Inclusive Leadership. And the reason why I run these webinars every fortnight is because I want to create the best place on earth to learn how to build inclusion into how your business runs. So with that in mind, I just want to start off with a quick poll with you. And this question, it will appear on your screen very soon, hopefully. Just bear with me. Yep, here we go. So it will appear on your screen. And the question is, which of these behaviors do you feel most confident in modeling as a leader? And you can tick as many as you like. So we've got empathy, relationship building, learning orientation, open-mindedness, composure, and flexibility. So the votes are coming in. I think we've got 75% participated so far. So the question is, which of these behaviors do you feel most confident in modeling as a leader? Empathy, relationship building, learning orientation, open-mindedness, composure, and flexibility. Cool. So I'm going to end the poll now because we got a good response rate. And the results we can see on the screen. So the one that really jumps out as people say, so 78% both say open-mindedness and flexibility, they model well. The behavior that I think is the least behind, which I see a lot when I talk to senior leadership teams, is composure at 33%, which is interesting, closely followed by a learning orientation, 44%. Which is surprising because given the fact that you've actually joined today's session would suggest that you have got a learning orientation, because that's one of the inclusive leadership behaviors of wanting to learn new knowledge, learn new skills, and kind of hone your craft, so to speak. So thanks for sharing. That's a really good answer to the poll, and I'll be going through that in a bit more detail. So let's first of all think about, well, why does inclusive leadership matter? Now, senior leaders, whether you like it or not, set the tone across the whole of the organization. And culture is caught rather than being taught. So the way that your senior leaders behave moment to moment is having this ripple effect. It's really shaping the tone of the organization, how people feel working within your organization. And ultimately, your senior leaders are the custodians of the culture of your business. And if you're a senior leader, whether you like it or not, you're being watched by everybody in your organization. And the way that you behave is giving permission to others about how they should behave, because they will ultimately be emulating your behaviors, whether that's conscious or not. It happens on both the conscious level, but also the other than conscious level as well. But inclusion is not just a HR initiative either. It's something that is a leadership responsibility. It often feels like it's something that's done to the business through HR. But ultimately, where we want to try and get an organization to, or the best place to get them to, is that we have this shared accountability or shared responsibility for inclusivity across the whole of the senior leadership team. And it's something that we've discussed in previous webinars about how do we actually increase accountability and ownership of inclusion amongst your senior leadership team. And something I like to get across in the workshops that I do with senior leaders is that inclusive leadership isn't about adding more to your plate. It's not about getting you to do more things to your leadership style. It's actually about sharpening your skills and sharpening your craft. It's about taking what you're already doing, but just bringing more conscious awareness and adding an inclusivity layer to it. So on the screen is this kind of ripple effect diagram that I've devised. So at the center of the diagram, you've got your leadership behaviors, but it's a bit like a ripple effect. If you throw a big stone into a pond, you get that ripple effect. So these behaviors are impacting your culture, which impacts how your teams perform, and also ultimately the reputation that your organization has. Now, there is a framework that we can use, that we can work with. These 6 behaviors were developed by an organization called Talogy that we work with. They do lots of assessments throughout the whole employee lifecycle. One of the assessments that they've devised back in 2012, when they did a project with the Metropolitan Police in London to look at inclusive leadership behaviors, it's called the perceptions framework or the perceptions model. And through their research, and if you're interested in the kind of the science behind it, there is a scientific psychological paper that I can share with you if you want. They came up with these 6 behaviors. So first of all, we've got empathy, which is about sensing other people's experiences and perspectives. It's not about sympathizing with other people. It's not about saying, I know where you're coming from. I feel sorry for you because I've been in a similar situation before. It's about creating the space for somebody to be able to kind of share their personal experience or their personal perspective with you. So as a leader, you're creating that space, you're creating that psychological safety for people to be able to open up. The second behavior is around relationship building. So inclusive leaderships are really good at forming authentic cross-cultural connections. They're able to easily connect with people who are different to themselves, and they go out of their way as well to connect with people who are quote unquote different to them, that have diverse lived experiences or diverse perspectives. Thirdly, inclusive leaders have got this learning orientation. They're very curious, but also they're very humble. They don't have this kind of know-it-all attitude. They're open to being quizzed, they're open to being challenged because they recognize that they don't necessarily know it all or have all of the answers. But they've got this learning orientation where they want to go out and get more knowledge and more information and soak up more data. The fourth behavior is open-mindedness. So inclusive leaders have got this open-mindedness. And what I mean by that is they suspend any judgment that they have and they embrace differences. So they're open to new ways of doing things. They're open to different cultures. They're open to different perspectives. They don't have this kind of closed view on the world about how things could or should be done. Penultimately, inclusive leaders have this level of composure. They're able to manage their reactions in difficult or unfamiliar situations or contexts. So they do experience emotions because at the end of the day, we're all human. It's something that we can't just turn off. Inclusive leaders do experience fear, anxiety, stress, depression, frustration, like the rest of us, but they're able to kind of consciously not let their emotions get the better of them. And that creates a stable culture or a stable environment in the team that they are doing as well. And then finally, we've got flexibility. So inclusive leaders are really good at adapting the way that they work or the way that they approach problems or the way they work with different individuals. And they change their styles to meet other people where they're at. So for example, if you're working with a colleague who's very introverted, but you're naturally extroverted, you can shapeshift in a way in order to change your personal leadership style to suit the person that you're leading or that you're working with. So those are the 6 behaviors that were developed by Talogy. It's a really useful framework. I mean, there are other frameworks out there. If you wanted to kind of Google it, it's worth looking at the Deloitte inclusive behaviors, for example, is a good framework. But the one that I personally like to work with is Talogy because it's very easy to understand. And it's got some really good sort of research grounding to it as well. So what is the data telling us? Because we've done a number of these assessments, and obviously Talogy have done thousands of these assessments now, so they've got lots of data. There's some really interesting data points that are coming out about inclusive leadership. Firstly, what we find is that actually a lot of leaders overestimate how empathic or open-minded they are. So leaders often feel that they're more empathic than they actually are, or what their subordinates or direct reports would actually say that they are, or they feel that they're a lot more open-minded than they actually are as well. That's a consistent theme. So I think we need to bring in that element of humbleness and also learn the skill about what does empathy mean, because I wouldn't describe myself as a particularly empathic person. It's a skill that I'm having to constantly work on in the relationships that I've got in my life, and it's hard work. I get it wrong a lot of the time, but it is something that you have to keep constantly keeping in the front of your mind and keep practicing and rehearsing. Often, and I think this came out in the interestingly came out in the poll that we did right at the beginning of this webinar. Composure and flexibility are often the lowest scored behaviors whenever people do the assessment. But composure and flexibility are often the most visible behaviors when we're working under pressure or stressful situations as well, interestingly. And then finally, one thing to bear in mind is that whenever we do these assessments, the majority of people are sitting right in the middle in the average. So if you imagine this like bell curve, you've got maybe 60% of the population sitting in the middle of the bell curve. And then you've maybe got 20% on the left-hand side, kind of scoring, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you've got people at 20% of the population in the right-hand side of the bell curve scoring the high numbers, 7s, 8, 9s, and 10s. But actually the vast majority of us are sitting in the right in the middle in the average. But we really rely on having inclusive leaders in the organization to really try to raise the bar across the whole of the senior leadership team. So there are some real sticking points to trying to enhance inclusive leadership behaviors within your organization. And I've developed this kind of ladder model, which is on the screen, where there's a lot of just unconscious exclusion happening. Your leaders are just not consciously aware of what they're doing moment to moment that are making people feel like they don't belong in your organization, or they're not respected for who they really are, or that they can't progress within the business. And some of us might describe these as kind of those, micro behaviors or microaggressions. They're often unintentional, but they do have this compound effect if you're on the receiving end of it. And over time, you question yourself, you doubt yourself, and you start to feel that perhaps you're the problem rather than the behaviors coming from other people. Then we move up into the middle, which is kind of like performative inclusion. So it's saying the right things to make yourself appear to be inclusive, but you're not necessarily challenging the systems or the unfair advantages or the unfair structures or the unfair systems that we've got happening within organizations. So performative inclusion looks like showing up to your employee resource group events, for example, that they organize, but not really getting involved, just showing your face. Wearing an LGBT lanyard during Pride Month, but not actually really challenging the organization on whether there are unfair policies or working practices that are discriminating against or disadvantaging LGBT individuals in the company. But then we move to the top of the ladder, which is very conscious. It's a very kind of intentional, inclusive leadership in terms of how you operate. I think there's some kind of unhelpful thoughts or mindsets that leaders have. A lot of leaders think, well, I treat everyone the same. Surely that's the right thing to do. That's the fair thing to do. And we actually covered the difference between equality and equity in one of our previous webinars, which is worth tuning into. But treating everybody the same doesn't set everybody else up, doesn't set everybody up for success, unfortunately. We have to focus on creating equity. And by that, I mean, we have to focus on what individuals need, where their starting point is, what assets they've already got at their disposal, what additional barriers they might be facing that other people aren't facing. And as an inclusive leader, we need to make sure that the individual is set up for success, that we're eliminating as many barriers for them as possible. The other thing is that when we're working under stress and when we're working under pressure, we normally default to our habitual behaviors, which might be non-inclusive behaviors. So we have to be very intentional, even when we're working under times of stress or pressure. So we have to almost think inclusion by design and make sure we get it really embedded into the way that we do things so that we don't just slip back into old routines or default to unhelpful behaviors or habits. And the 6 behaviors that I shared with you are observable. You can see it in other people, but it's really difficult to spot it in ourselves because we're having to operate on this other unconscious level a lot of the time. So you might look at a colleague and go, well, you're not being very empathic in this situation. And I don't think I think your lack of empathy is actually harming the situation. But it's actually very difficult for us to kind of self-reflect and go, okay, what's my level of empathy right now? What's my level of open-mindedness right now? So inclusive leadership is just good leadership. What we're talking about today is just being a better leader. We're not asking you to do anything new or anything different. You know, yes, I've given you some additional frameworks to think about, but at the end of the day, frameworks are there as a way to help guide our thinking. It gives us a bit of structure to work towards. But inclusivity in terms of your leadership style is not this bolt-on thing. We're not asking you to do anything new or do anything different. We're just asking you to try and embed it into how you operate as a leader, how you make your decisions, how you communicate with your team, and how you lead change within your organization. It's actually about fine-tuning what you're already doing. It's not about overhauling it. It's about making those slight tweaks or slight adjustments to take you from a 9 out of 10 leader to a 10 out of 10 leader. But when you get it right, it has this really positive impact. If you think back to that kind of ripple effect diagram that I showed you, it will improve team performance. It will enhance psychological safety so people feel safer speaking up, sharing ideas with you, challenging problems, flagging risks and issues that are going on in your team. And then ultimately that leads to better commercial outcomes. You'll deliver a better product or service to your clients. It will hopefully add to the bottom line, because you're doing a better job as a business. And we don't need to seek permission to be doing this. We have to start the work now. It's important to really walk the talk. Don't wait for permission, because if you role model these good behaviors, if you walk the talk, you are then naturally giving people permission to emulate you and to really improve the culture of your organization. So now let's apply this to your organization. What have I said so far today that's really kind of been a light bulb moment for you that you think is useful? Is there anything that you think, oh, that's interesting, I'd quite like to start applying that to my business? What are your thoughts on the matter? Just unmute yourself and share your thoughts with me.
I think for me, it's the simplification of the theory and the practice. So what you just said, inclusive leadership, is just good leadership. It's not like a bolt-on, and I love that saying. It's not like an added behavior you need to train yourself. You either inclusive or you're not, simply as. And I like that, because sometimes we have to be the instructors, the reminders for that leadership team.
Yeah.
I come fortunately from a good leadership team who practice, but it's trying to create that ripple effect through the rest of the business.
Yes.
But
Yeah, definitely.
so if we're able to give them the right tools, it should make things easier. Should. Thank you.
That's right. And Joe, if I could come back to you, you say that you work in a team which is modeling good inclusive leadership behaviors, which is really great to hear. How is that team then trying to get that ripple effect to other layers of the business? Is there anything working for you?
So I say relatively new. It's almost been a year since I've been in the organisation. The practices were there, but it wasn't across the business. So, for example, we did equality impact assessments, we did reviews, we had an EDI strategy, all those type of things. However, it was very the people who were responsible for those. It wasn't your rent manager who would be conscious of a equality impact assessment. It'll be somebody doing it on behalf of the person. And although we were then training or advocating for that rent manager, for example, using the name very loosely, what I'm trying to inbuild is, or we're trying to inbuild is, the rent manager should be aware of an equality impact assessment. The housing manager should. Every manager in the organisation should have that quality impact assessment way of thinking in their practice, not somebody who comes along and does it as an bolt-on, as you described. So we've got the practices, but it just needs to be spread out. And this is the responsibility for those practices needs to be spread out.
Absolutely.
That makes sense. So so although I come from a great leadership team and a great team that are strategic for the EDI planning and thoughts, those practices weren't done by everybody. They were applied everywhere, but weren't done by everyone. Thank you.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thanks, Joe. I really like that. And I like one thing that stuck with me is if we look at doing equality impact assessments, for example, there's the technical way of doing it. But I like what Joe said around it can come back to the mindset as well. Yes, there's the tools and the workflow and the practices of doing an equality impact assessment, but it starts with mindset. It's about, I'm going to implement this change within the business, but which individuals or which groups might be impacted by this change adversely, and what proactive steps are we going to try to minimize any potential impact? So it's a good mindset practice. Great. So what I'd like to do now is just kind of go into breakout groups for about 5 minutes. I'm going to put you into pairs or threes, and I'd like you in your pairs or threes just to discuss this question. So which of the 6 behaviors that I went through today do you struggle to model consistently, or do you feel your leadership team struggles to model consistently? And what would help strengthen it? So with that, I'm going to put you into your breakout rooms. I'm going to put, 2 or 3 people in each breakout room. And then for about 5 minutes, and then we'll reconvene and have a broader conversation as well. So I will see you in about 5 minutes. Great. So in your breakout rooms, the conversation or the question was, which of those 6 behaviors do you think your senior leadership team or you personally struggle to model consistently? And what would help strengthen it? What came up for you in your breakout conversations? Cool. Cynthia, hey.
Yeah. Alice and I were having an interesting conversation, and we came up with, where does patience fit in on that scale? Like, do you assign it to any one particular category when we talk about not having the patience for others to catch up and kind of be where they need to be?
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you feel it fits into the model?
Well, I guess if it manifests in a behavior, it's composure.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's really a mindset,
Yeah.
which probably is more empathy, that you
Yeah.
understand somebody's not there because of whatever reason, and having empathy. That
Yeah.
sort of my take on it.
Yeah. I would agree with you on that. Yeah. I think it's kind of embedded in certainly in those two. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? What came up for you in your breakout conversations? Anything interesting? Hey, Vicky.
Hi. Rebecca and I came up with different choices, but mine was again around composure. And what I was explaining, I'm in the charity sector. We're pretty good at EDI, and we know that because of our staff surveys. And I was just telling Rebecca that we're all so very comfortable with each other. It's quite a small team, and everyone kind of is very much about, bringing themselves to work. We're familiar, comfortable, open. That I think sometimes we can let composure slip just because it feels comfortable to do so. But then are we then actually telling people too much?
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you think about those 6 behaviors, they're all on a sliding scale of 1 to 10. And the numbers don't reflect good or bad, strong or weak. They are an indicator of your style. And in some situations, you would want to score a 1 out of 10 on composure. And in other situations, you would want to be a 10 out of 10 on composure. And just to give you a real life example, so I did the Talogy assessment with a client of mine. He's the chief executive of a big company, and he scored 10 out of 10 on composure. And I thought, oh, this we're off to a good start here, 10 out of 10 on composure. And then we went through the behaviors, and I kind of always say to people, so out of these 6 behaviors, which behaviors do you want to either dial up or dial down? And he was like, I want to dial down on my composure. And I was like, okay, but you're a 10 out of 10 composure. Is that not a good thing? And he was like, no. He said, I'm a 10 out of 10 composure, but sometimes that comes across as me not caring. about my team, when I really do care about my team. And also I want to be able to demonstrate some of the frustrations or some of the concerns that I have as the business leader with my team. I don't want to be keeping it all to myself. I want to display some more emotion. So for him in that moment, you know, a 10 out of 10 on Composure wasn't a good thing. He wanted to turn it down. And then I did an inclusive leadership workshop with another company. They're a manufacturing company. We did it on the collective level. So there was about 11 leaders in the room. So we had the kind of the group, what the group profile looked like. And collectively, they scored quite high on flexibility. And I said to them, okay, so which ones do you want to dial up or dial down? And they said, oh, we want to dial down on flexibility. We feel like we're being too flexible, where we're not setting boundaries with our team members. We're being overly consultative. And that means that it's leading to indecision. We're not, as a leadership team, we're not kind of sticking our stake in the ground and going, this is the decision that we've made. This is the direction we're going in, because they were being too flexible to what other people were thinking or their feedback, and the way that they operated as well. So there was this, it felt like a little bit of chaos was going on, and they wanted to try and bring that in a bit. So that's how useful this kind of type of framework can be. Cool. So just to wrap up, I just want to do another poll with you. This time, let me just open it up. So, okay, the question is, having attended today's session, how confident do you feel about applying what we've covered today in your own organizations? And the options range from very confident, I know exactly what I'm going to do next, somewhat confident, I've got ideas, but I need to prioritize them, not very confident, I'm still unclear about how to apply it, or not confident at all, we're not set up for this internally. Great. Excellent. Results coming in. So I'm going to end the poll there and share the results. And what we can see is that the majority of people at 67% are feeling very confident. I know what I'm going to do next, which is great. So I'm glad that today's topic has helped you on that journey. And then 33% say somewhat confident, I've got ideas, but I need to prioritize them, which is also cool. So I'll stop sharing that. So just before we drop off, if you did want to have a conversation with me, maybe you felt like you couldn't ask me a question in today's open forum, or you're watching the recording, so you weren't able to actually add anything in the chat. But if you did want to have a half an hour meeting with me, and we can talk about how we can apply some of the concepts that we've talked about today to your team, then feel free to book in a meeting with me. I've put in the chat a link to my Calendly page, so you can just get straight to my diary, or you can use the QR code on the screen if you've got your mobile phone to hand. I just want to emphasize that this is not a sales meeting, okay? This is purely me saying that I can make myself available for half an hour to talk about today's topic and how it can be applied to your organization. If at the end of that half an hour, you're like, oh, actually, I could do with Toby's help, then, yes, we can schedule a follow-up call. But if at the end of that half an hour, you're like, no, I've got everything I need, I feel like I can go on my own way, then that's equally cool. So I'm just making myself available in my diary. The next webinar is in a fortnight, and the topic of the next webinar is called Beyond Policies, Embedding Inclusion into Your Company's DNA. So we're really going to be thinking about the mindset, the strategies, and the tools that you need to think about how you really get diversity and inclusion embedded into the DNA of your organization. So it's not seen as this kind of box ticking exercise or something that only the HR department is doing to the organization and dragging everyone along with them. It's really getting it integrated into just the way that you work. So if that's of interest to you, make sure that you tune into the next topic. So thanks ever so much for joining me today. I really hope that's been useful for you. I am available to support you if you need any help. Until then, I hope you have a lovely rest of the day. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks.